Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Decentralize This, where we talk about crypto and decentralized systems in general, the markets, macro, pretty much anything else we'd like to talk about that's tangential to those topics. This is your hosts, Atif and Doug. And, Doug, we had planned to do this podcast at this exact time anyway. And then about like 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago, word landed that the SEC was going to go gangbusters and whip out the big guns against the biggest crypto exchange in the world, Binance. So I'll open it up to you, man. We've only had maybe about an hour or so to digest the news ourselves, and more will probably be forthcoming in the next few weeks. What are your initial thoughts about this lawsuit, this development?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to call it weird timing, coincidence. Obviously, like we all been talking about recently, the political drums are starting to, beat up slowly. We were kind of joking about it the last couple of weeks at the meetups too. Stuff's kind of been too quiet. It's kind of the running joke with parents. If you have kids, you kind of want them making noise because if they're too quiet, that's how you know they're fucking shit up. And, we were kind of joking, like we've been sideways for about the last 60, 90 calendar days, been pretty quiet. So not saying we were due for something like this, but it doesn't surprise me. And same thing too. Obviously, like we talk about all the static white noise is gone right now, and obviously whether there's Gary Gensler or any of these other pundits up in DC and New York, stuff's quiet and calm right now. So obviously, if I was them, now would be a good time to strike. So I wouldn't say I saw this coming, but like we've been talking about, it's been pretty. Just tame, for lack of a better word, the last 60, 90 days. So it kind of just seems fitting that this hits right now.
Yeah, it's definitely. We met up yesterday at our meetup group, and I was kind of joking a little bit. I said, I just wish Bitcoin would do something already, right? It's been like 3 months, and it did. It did drop by 7% today. So it's the most volatile it's been in quite a long time. Although I do sort of think that the market is overreacting. And I say that because, the actual lawsuit is 163 pages. Obviously, I didn't read the whole thing, but I quickly popped on Twitter to see what the highlights were, what the basic issues were that Binance is being accused of. And whenever these lawsuits come around, and whenever like some exchange is in trouble, whether that be Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, or whatever, the lens that I look at it through is how will this impact something like Bitcoin? And the short answer is that this has really no impact whatsoever on Bitcoin itself, right? And so the reason I say that is, I sort of wrote up a list of the different kind of misdemeanors, that Binance has been accused of. The one that I see here that I think is probably the most serious is that Binance has been accused of commingling funds, and this should remind you of FTX and Alameda. That's if someone is wondering what commingling funds mean, it's when Sam Bankman-Fried would send over user money to a private hedge fund that he ran called Alameda. And when Alameda went bust, he just sort of kept it alive by moving in customer money, hoping to sort of make back his losses. Specifically, Binance is not being accused of running a sort of shadow hedge fund using user money. And there's not really any clear details of exactly how these funds were commingled, other than to say that apparently CZ owned a entity in the U.S., I forget the name of it, and some money had moved from Binance to that entity. But I don't think like the scale of money being moved is like in the billions, like as it was with Alameda. And it's also, I think, clear that this happened a few years ago. That's one thing. They got accused of wash trading, which whatever, who cares? They also got accused of, basically being in control of Binance.us, which was purported to be the completely independent, franchised version of Binance that was independent and operating in the U.S. that had nothing to do with Binance at all. But the lawsuit says that, well, actually, CZ was pretty much running the show, and the CEO of Binance US was not really independent at all. The word shackles were used. That the main Binance party is basically just shackled to Binance US. The other thing, whether or not it matters or not, is that they said that, well, Binance allowed U.S. customers to buy tokens on their exchange, even though they were not supposed to provide services for U.S. customers. It was like, who gives a shit about that? That's like, whatever. And so there's one or two others, but, just to sort of like put a circle around these ones, these are things that, I think all foreign exchanges outside of the U.S. have engaged in this sort of activity. And while this is kind of shady stuff, I don't know much about the commingling funds thing. I think if, hopefully that's not some giant operation, where they're commingling so much funds that it's basically turns into some sort of an existential issue for Binance's funds. I really don't think that's the case. But who knows, right? I mean, everyone thought FTX was solid until it wasn't solid. But if we just sort of like assume that that's not like a multi-billion-dollar scandal like waiting to be unearthed, all the other stuff just sort of seems like just standard operating procedure for a lot of these exchanges that were operating in a environment of complete regulatory uncertainty, and so they were bending a lot of rules, breaking some rules. But it's not like they were going out like murdering children, right? I mean, they were just sort of bending the rules of finance. Banks do this all the time. Wells Fargo has been fined, many billions of dollars for this. J.P. Morgan gets fined every 2 years. Whether that's running a cocaine-laden ship or just some other kind of shenanigans. So in the scheme of things, there's no giant smoking gun that's like, oh my God, Binance, was smuggling, North Korean children for slave labor or some like ridiculously egregious activity that has been unmasked by this lawsuit. So these sort of allegations, I'm like, whatever, like it's just the SEC, sort of waving its, phallus around, trying to have some sort of stamp of authority, and they're basically, I think, also trying to wrest control in the regulatory tussle that's going on in Washington right now, in the sense of like who is regulating what. The thing that does bother me is that almost in a throwaway kind of line in the lawsuit, and this line I actually read myself, one of the other things that they're being accused of is listing and selling unregistered securities. So they're being accused of breaking securities laws, and the accusation here is that they have listed the following securities, which are unregistered. And they mention Solana, Matic,
So.
ADA, Cardano, Filecoin, I think, and a bunch of others. I think there's like 12 of them they listed. Pretty much all, a lot of them in the top 15 or whatever of the crypto market cap. BNB is another one. I'm looking at it. They didn't mention XRP, which I think is really hilarious. Polygon Matic, I don't think they didn't mention Polkadot, but they also said, not limited to these, so they reserve the right to expand the list. And this really is the only part of the lawsuit that I feel is concerning, because they're basically, again, having their cake and eating it too, which means that they're calling things securities without, giving us definitional parameters for like, okay, why do we think Solana is a security, or Matic is a security, or BNB is a security, or ADA is a security? And, some of them may well be securities. I'm not saying that they're not all like have security-like features, but again, we don't have definitions. And the SEC is, I think, trying to skirt under the radar by just saying, hey, they're securities, and therefore there's securities fraud going on over here. And this, I think, is going to be quite interesting, because this is a relatively long list of securities that they've, of tokens, I should say, that they've listed under the umbrella of securities without any further elaboration as to why they're securities. This is the longest list they've come up with. And it's not like they went on to defend their definitions in the lawsuit. They just like assumed, yeah, these are securities. We're suing you for this as well. So this, I think, is going to be another kind of point of contention. These tokens that are listed, Matic and Solana and Cardano, BNB. These are ecosystems that have billions of dollars of market cap. They have a lot of VC funding behind them. I know that Andreessen Horowitz is invested in a bunch of these things. Many hedge funds, many other kind of services like Grayscale, for example, has products, in which they've put in Solana and Matic and Cardano and a lot of these other things. Uniswap, for example, lists a lot of these things, right? So you could then argue, well, Uniswap is also selling securities. Interestingly, though, Ethereum was not mentioned as a security in this, but this seems to be, yet another gauntlet laid down on the question of the securities issue. So what are your thoughts specifically about this particular part of the lawsuit that, they've just sort of labeled a whole bunch of things, securities, left it at that, and then went on another 100 pages of, accusations?
No, I think you hit it perfectly. We always kind of joke about it. People want their cake and eat it too. They want their abs and pizza. And we've talked about this like on here and in the meetup at ad nauseum. I think one of the biggest issues with just the crypto community, which is kind of a buzzword too, because we're kind of like 100 different communities smashed together, is not like the crypto community. But just for the sake of argument, the crypto community, we have everything from leading tech innovators to the Alex Gladsteins, who are humanitarians and want to help people in different disenfranchised countries, to we have just the tech bros and everything in between. And like we talk about this too, one of the biggest problems just with any technical revolution is that the pace of innovation, whether it's the SECs of the world or just whatever we're going to call the governing body of laws, wherever this stuff's happening, it obviously can't keep up. And recently a lot of the AI stuff's been popping off, and there's been not bills, but like letters signed by Elon Musk, the Wozniaks of the world and stuff. And like I was telling you too, I think stuff is quiet right now, and obviously the Ripple thing is still transpiring. So I think this is kind of just SEC's chance, like you said, just to kind of gum stuff up right now. We're like, all right, the horse is out of the barn. We've kind of like we always talk about, like, Ripple's been around for whatever number of years it's been now, and then they finally just sued them, or a couple of years ago finally sued them, and the horse is out of the barn. So I think they're kind of just, like you said, they want their cake and eat it too. And I think they're just doing this to gum everything up right now, because like you said, you named it was Solana, Cardano, Decentraland, like projects with billions of dollars, real VC capital, been around for years, and now they're kind of just barking their whistle at it. So I think you nailed it. I think it's just they're kind of horses out of the barn. I think they're just trying to gum up the wheels right now because they kind of realize, like, oh shit, they're already on third base.
Yeah, again, I think of the entire lawsuit, this is the part that really, I think, matters most for cryptocurrency investors. It's whether or not this listing of securities violations really sticks or doesn't stick. And, I see two potential outcomes here. The first one is what I think the more likely one, which is I think the XRP lawsuit decision will come at some point in time. I mean, who knows when it's going to come? We keep thinking it's going to be this month, and then it's not.
Next month. Yeah.
I mean, it's been a really long time since this judge is sitting on the judgment here. But and I was saying this in the meetup as well yesterday when we were together in person, that the judge is going to decide one way or the other, right? If, for example, she decides that, okay, the SEC does not have a case here and XRP is not a security, she's going to have to come up with some kind of a legal rationale for why she thinks that's the case, right? And it's completely opaque to me what that might be. One possibility is that she could just decide that there is some sort of statutes of limitations on whether or not something can be labeled as security. The SEC can come any number of years later, once an ecosystem is already up and running and business is already operating, which is XRP. XRP is actually being used by banks, and it has, real world use case. I'm not an XRP fan. I'm not defending it or anything, but I'm just saying that it is something that is used in the real world by, banks out there, right? Not my bank, not a lot of American banks, I'm sure, but it still has use case. There's still a company that makes money using this token. So the judge may say, well, the SEC can't wait like just any number of years and then like decide, oh, I think that was a security all along, let me go sue them, right? And shut the entire business down in the name of like protecting customers. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So it could be a statutes of limitation argument. It could be, well, XRP is actually quite decentralized argument. It could be that a lot of other people also joined the lawsuit. I think there was a few hundred, maybe a few thousand people who sort of joined the lawsuit as well, saying, hey, we're an interested party. I forget what the legal term for that is. And these people are saying, listen, when we bought XRP, we didn't have some promise from Ripple for expectations of profit, right, which is one of the definitions of a security. So whatever the rationale is, and I could go on and on about hypotheticals, that will essentially serve as a criteria against which other cryptocurrencies are also judged, right? So if, just for example, one of the criteria is a statute of limitations, is like the SEC has 2 years, 3 years, 5 years to call something security before it's too late. They can't just like Johnny come lately years after the fact and call something a security. If it's a statute of limitation argument, then a lot of these things will resolve for that reason. If it's it's not a security because it's decentralized enough, which is something that the SEC has said about cryptocurrency, then maybe the next step is, well, all right, give us a chance then to make it decentralized enough. So maybe then the concept of a grace period is introduced. Again, I'm making all this stuff up. Because if the SEC has publicly stated that Bitcoin is not a security because it is decentralized enough, but that wasn't always the case, right? There was once upon a time it was Satoshi and Hal Finney and one other guy who ran Bitcoin, right? They had all the hash power, so it wasn't decentralized then, right? And then the question becomes, well, how are you defining decentralization? Are you defining it as decentralization based on the consensus mechanism, decentralization of the wallets, decentralization of who writes the code? There's different ways of defining decentralization. We've talked about this on our podcast before many times. But whatever that decision is when it comes out, I think that will, if the judge rules, for XRP, that's a giant if as well, then it will hopefully lend, unfortunately, through legislation, it will through a summary judgment or a lawyer's judgment, a judge's judgment. It will lay down some criteria for how to judge securities, and then the SEC might appeal that or whatever. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that the Binance decides to take this all the way to court and contest some of these charges. I don't think they can contest a lot. I mean, there's some stuff in there that they have the Binance down cold on, right? The Binance, for example, may have commingled funds. These things are actually not difficult to prove. Binance may, for example, been very lax in the beginning about allowing U.S. customers to buy on their exchange. That might be something that they should have been doing better about. I don't think any of these things are materially important at all. Like whether or not a U.S. customer uses Binance, who cares, right? I mean, that's no one is getting hurt by having that happen. But it's this, whether they're selling unregistered securities or not, which is, I think, the biggest part of this Binance lawsuit. So anyway, I'll turf it over to you. I mean, what are your thoughts on these initial sort of pain points of the lawsuit?
Nah, I was like you when this whole thing cracked, just because I went on Twitter, just because the algorithm, whenever a story breaks, the first thing on there. And same thing was all these unregistered securities. They weren't, they said publicly, oh, we're not letting U.S. customers on, but then privately they were kind of letting their kind of upper triple class guys come in. And then they laundered some money. And, this is one of the reasons I love Twitter. I saw a tweet by CoinDesk, and I read some of their article, but then I went to the comments section just because that's where you get the real gold. And then in one part of the article, someone commented on, it's like, man, y'all talk about money laundering. They bought a yacht for $11 million. It must have not been a good yacht. What are we talking about here? And then I kept going down through, and then same thing. I think they were getting them on accusations they didn't register as a market maker. Same thing, exchange, and then I forget what was the other one. It was like treasury utility. There's another thing they didn't. But I'm like you too. I was going through it. I'm like, okay, they might have laundered some money. Same thing. There's some they didn't in the CoinDesk article name exactly, but there might have been a shell thing that CZ had access to. But I was going through it too, and I was kind of like you. I was like, okay, a lot of this is kind of SOP standard. This isn't. I mean, it just broke like we said 2-3 hours ago. This isn't on the level of FTX. But I was kind of going through it. And I'm like, yeah, none of this is really groundbreaking to me. I was still trying to kind of figure out what the the meat and bones of it was, and the only thing that really caught my eye, like you said, was kind of they named, I don't know what we want to call it, maybe out of the 10 unregistered securities, I think all of them maybe except for Filecoin, and I'm trying to think like Decentraland, they're all like in the top 25. So it was kind of one of those things too where it's like, all right, are they kind of just throwing shit in a wall and hoping that they're going for some of these larger caps here, they might be able to get some weight in court? Because like you said, all the other stuff would be a slap on the wrist. I couldn't see any major judge like bringing the hammer down. Like maybe they get them on it, but it's like slap on the wrist fine, like you said, with the Wells Fargos, the JP Morgans of the world, and they keep it moving. But like I was like you, the only thing that really caught my eye is like they just kind of happened. How do I word this? Of the list of unregistered securities, the fact that of the 12, 7 of them were in the top 20, 25 market caps, I just kind of found coincidental. But I was like you, I kind of skimmed through the whole thing while, like we said, this broke 2 hours ago, but nothing really caught my eye where it's like maybe this could turn to FTX 2.0. But like, I mean, you're aware when FTX started to break, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it broke like on a Friday. The news, let me correct myself, the news of FTX broke on a Friday. I think by Monday morning it was basically done. So it's like, unless Binance comes to a crippling halt in 48 hours, I don't see how this is anything major. But like you said, the market kind of took to it pretty volatile. I mean, we're only down 7%, which is still kind of whatever. But I mean, we're kissing 25K for the first time in a while. So I think the market's worried about it. But I'm like you, I found most of it kind of just to be hush hush.
Yeah. We always like to draw parallels between what's happening now and what happened in the past. And the last time a large exchange was in some sort of trouble was FTX, but I don't really know that it's the same sort of thing. I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried was just like a moron. I mean, he was just an idiot, right? I mean, there was nothing particularly clever about him. I think he just like hoodwinked a whole bunch of people. Binance has been around for a long time, and it has been stress tested multiple times. Like even during the time of the FTX thing, a ton of Bitcoin left Binance as well. Everyone panicked and everyone moved everything off all the exchanges, and Binance was no exception either, because nobody really knew how large the contagion was going to be. And since those FTX days, Bitcoin has moved from something like 16,000 or whatever it was around that time to 25,000 it is today, right? So it's gone up quite a bit as well. So the market has recovered quite a bit. My instinct tells me that I don't think Binance is another FTX, however. But, another thing that I wanted to bring up over here is I did a quick scan of the Twitter reaction to this, and one of the things that I saw immediately is that there was kind of a dichotomy in the reactions. There were some people who were like, this is an attack on crypto. We should all stand with CZ and support Binance. And this is, us against the SEC, us against the government. We should all be supportive of Binance's attempts to fight back on these concerns. And then, of course, there was the other side of the equation as well, where like the Bitcoiners, the maximalists, are more than happy to cheer on the SEC as long as anything but Bitcoin is attacked, right? And you have a whole bunch of Bitcoiners out there saying, well, we told you so, CZ is a fraud and everything but Bitcoin is a fraud. We've been warning you for years. And, this is really ironic because if Binance falls, right, and CZ falls, what are the on-ramps going to be? I mean, how are people going to buy all this Bitcoin that, the Bitcoiners are trying to promote? Where's the on-ramp going to be if not an exchange, right? And, of course, you can argue that Binance may have done things that were not completely kosher. Again, I am agnostic. I don't know if they've done something like really super terrible, if this is all a house of cards. My instinct says it's not, but what do I know? I'm just a guy on the internet. But at the same time, I mean, it's an important exchange that is an on-ramp for millions of people around the world, and it's probably done more to on-ramp people to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, of course, being primarily the prime example. It has done more to onboard people to Bitcoin than any Bitcoin maximalist has done, right? And it's just really kind of annoying to see the maxis, sort of wave, sort of a flag of celebration about what's happening, right? As if, we know if Binance falls and disappears or gets hurt significantly, that's not going to somehow affect Bitcoin's price. I mean, if Binance falls and, Coinbase is in a lawsuit and Kraken was also sued a few months ago, how are people going to, then want to get on these exchanges and buy Bitcoin? They're going to think, well, everything that is touching Bitcoin or crypto is a scam. Let's just stay away from the whole thing. So it's really unfortunate how the crypto community is not really united in any way either, right? And I mean, this is difficult to witness because we need a united front against these sort of regulatory overreaches, right? I don't see it happening. I do hope that, the Bitcoin maximalists, who are very prominent, right? Michael Saylor's up there, Saifuddin Amos up there, a bunch of others who are more than happy to be dancing on Binance's grave, and that doesn't help anybody, right? And it's this short-sightedness, I think, that they don't really see. Do you have any comments on the Twitter sort of bifurcation or the community bifurcation in terms of them responding to Binance?
Yeah, I think I was telling you, like, one of my opening comments. I think one thing that gets lost, whether it's this, whether we were talking about the ledger stuff, just, anything we talk about that's, constantly swirling around on crypto Twitter. Like I said, there isn't really the crypto community. I mean, you can make this argument for anything. There isn't, yes, there's like Americans, but, we're a whole mixing pot. You go from, North Washington State down to Alabama, you are going to feel like you're in two separate countries. You go from Maine to Miami, same thing. But it's like that with crypto. Like, we are a community, just that we are, people that are in this ecosystem, and we're kind of on the frontier, whatever the hell this Web3 thing's going to be. But like you just said, we have everything from, degent, JPEG, Pepe traders to full-blown, Bitcoin maxis, where it's like, maybe they bought some shit coins back in 2012 and like it was a little bit of Litecoin Ethereum. And since then, they have, 25 CoinKit multi-sigs spread around 8 parts of the continent. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the thing when stuff like this breaks, which makes it more, I don't want to say confusing, just more, I guess, just like difficult to decipher, or like even for you and me, but people that are outside of this, dome, where it's like, try to explain, like, for example, say we had like some new people last night to meet up, and say if we went today back to radio, they're like, oh, is this Binance thing good or bad? It's like, well, who are you talking to? Because depending on who you're talking to, the community, like you said, you talk to Bitcoin Maxi, it's great because, now it just proves more that, Bitcoin's the alpha coin. But then you talk to a degent trader, they're like, oh, this fucking sucks, because now it's like, like you said, out of the 10 major on-ramps for North Americans, what we say 5, 6 of them are kind of not in turmoil, but they're kind of stuck in honey right now. But like I told you, I went on there, and one of the first comments I saw on the CoinDesk article was someone's like, man, can we all calm down? They're talking about $11 million yacht. This can't be that serious. And then like 2 more comments down were like look out, Bitcoin, choke point 2.0 is still activated. So I'm like you. One thing I do find funny about the crypto community is just it's not as, like you said, it's not really the storyline, it's who's reading it, because depending on who you're talking to, it's a big deal or it's not. So it's, it's another day in the office for us, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is not an easy space to be in, right? This last 16 months has been really brutal. If I gotta say, if you're in crypto and you have survived the last 18 months, you deserve like OG.
You're a warrior.
OG
You're a warrior.
Status, like you are really up there with the OGs. Like you absolutely deserve all the wins that are coming in the next 1 or 2 years, right? Speaking of wins, let's just change the subject just to slightly move on to crypto around the world, in places that is not the US, right? Because, if you're a crypto company and you're seeing these sort of regulatory enforcement actions and you're seeing a very hostile environment and you're seeing the Elizabeth Warrens of the world saying that crypto is fueling the fentanyl crisis, right? Which is it's like the dumbest.
Did she really say that?
Did you not hear? She basically.
No, how recent was this? I must have missed that.
It's yet another of her ridiculous rhetoric. She basically blamed cryptocurrency for the fentanyl crisis. She said it's fueling the fentanyl. She didn't say it's all because of it. She said it's enabling the fentanyl crisis, which I thought was really hilarious because there were some people on Twitter that wrote back to her like, Elizabeth Warren, please feel free to create a money that is not used for drug trade, 'Cause, whatever money is, whatever settlement layer you choose to use, whether that's Bitcoin, the US dollar, pesos, or bags of salt, people are going to use it to do good things and bad things, right? And if you just decide that you're just going to focus on the bad things, it's not all that there is. But anyway, what I was getting at is that if you are a US-based crypto company or a hedge fund or an investor, then you see these sort of things. Again, the Operation Choke Point 2.0 being very real, very much, the government putting their thumb on the scales of what they think is legitimate business activities, and they're definitely saying we don't welcome, cryptocurrency as legitimate business activities. I think there's no doubt at all that, we are living in an incredibly increasingly hostile and increasingly openly hostile regime under this current administration. I don't know if you caught this either, but during the stupid debt ceiling negotiations, which was a waste of everybody's time, in one of the phases of the negotiations, Biden, came on some podium and says, I will not negotiate with the Republicans to protect millionaires and rich crypto traders, which I don't know if you caught that. That was also another ridiculous thing that he said during that whole thing. So it's top down. It's Biden, it's Warren, it's the SEC. A lot of people are against it. And a few days ago in Hong Kong, they opened up license applications for cryptocurrency exchanges, and I'm sure Binance is going to be applying. Huobi has applied already, and I don't know how long it's going to take for them to actually be approved, but retail access is not going to finally be completely legitimate in China. I mean, I should be exact. It's actually legitimate in Hong Kong, but Chinese nationals will also be able to participate, if they register, entities in Hong Kong, then through those entities they can also buy cryptocurrency. We also see pretty progressive regulatory frameworks established in Europe with the MiCA bill, which we talked about the last time. The UK has also opened its arms to crypto, and Dubai is basically the epicenter of crypto in the Middle East now. So you have a lot of these other sites that are opening up their arms to cryptocurrency, coming into their markets. And, I got to think, if I was running a company that was crypto adjacent or crypto related, I'd be looking at all of this. I'm like, fuck this. I'm just leaving, because you look at this and you look at, the political landscape just in general is a catastrophe. The debt ceiling is super high. These guys, go through all this drama to pass the debt ceiling. So there's just a growing sense of lack of confidence in the administrative state, that rules over the United States. You might be thinking, why even bother with the access to U.S. markets, right? Why not just, the world is big. There's a lot to be done. There's all of Africa, to financialize with crypto that's, willing and ready. And they also have high rates of adoption as well. They also understand crypto a lot better because they don't have banks to fall back on. So the only way they can actually do any kind of banking is to crypto. So for a lot of these countries that are very poor, that never had access to banks, for the first time in their lives, they have access to DeFi, capabilities, or the ability to self-custody their own money, or even self-custody foreign monies like, USDT or USDC in a way that was inaccessible to them before. Do you think that, the horse has left the barn and we are now about to see an exodus that is just one way, that, at some point in time, the U.S. just does too much, and companies just say, "Well, fuck this shit, we're leaving." Like, the rest of the world is opening us, has opened our arms, opened their arms to to us with or has welcomed us with open arms. Why are we staying in a country that is so hostile, right? I mean, there's so much upside potential to go in crypto. It doesn't have to come all from the United States.
Yeah. There's a couple ways to take this. Like you were talking about, or we were talking about Operation Choke Point 2.0, and same thing. Like you said, you got everything from, some people think Bitcoin was made by the CIA, and now they're doing this whole choke point to kill their own Frankenstein monster, and then more rational people like us, they're like, oh, the horse is out of the barn. We need to reel this shit in because obviously, governments do a lot of good. They also, like to keep everyone in line for obvious reasons. And then, we joke about this too in crypto. We always say, slowly then suddenly. Eric Voorhees, a lot of other people who back in like the 2010s, 2012s when they started, Coinbase companies or Bitcoin companies in New York City, and then they came down with the Bit license. Basically, like 90% of them, they're like, "Yo, fuck this! I'm going out to the West Coast. I'm going this, that, and a third." So and that's about 10 years on the dot. So I think it shows that 10 years ago, when New York City, which used to be the financial center of the world, not even North America, of the world, wasn't even open to this. 10 years later, we kind of see trickle effects of that. And my reason I bring that up with the Operation Choke Point, a lot of people. Not a lot of people, but I've seen some stuff on the Twitters, the interwebs, where they think part of the reason they're being so hostile to this is they actually want all these companies to leave. And then when they go to other places of the world, obviously some of these companies might flourish, but it's crypto. We're throwing shit at a wall. We're building a plane while we're flying it. A lot of stuff's going to fall apart. Well, if all this exodus happens, I've seen some quack stuff where it's like, oh, well, there'll be a power vacuum, and they'll have more incentive and ease of use to get a CBDC going, which I kind of get, but it's like, even if they were crypto friendly, I think they could still push a CBDC, and that's a whole other thing. But I mean, no, to your point, I mean, it is kind of embarrassing how 50, 60 years ago, we were the lighthouse of the world. We were the financial hub of the world, highest GDP, highest, educated population. And that slowly started to slide. And it seems like one of the major things that could save us via crypto, whether it was AOC, Biden, Elizabeth Warren, even we've talked about it, Ted Cruz, I think gun to head, he couldn't really tell you shit about Bitcoin. I think he's just barking about it for some votes, being Texas is kind of, trying to become the new epicenter in North America. But I mean, yeah, we've talked about it. I mean, it does concern me. I mean, I don't, anything could happen, like we've joked about after COVID. I don't think it'll be like a 3-month window that all these companies just exit. But to your point, man, let's, God forbid, Ripple does lose that, and then the SEC just starts whipping out, going after everybody. I mean, we could see in 12, 24 months, like you said, all these companies go to Dubai or Ireland or wherever, and then that could be just it's a weird table flip, because obviously if crypto adoption happens worldwide, that's kind of good for everyone. But to your point, if it happens via a max exodus out of North America, that could be interesting to see how that folds out. So
yeah, I mean, you raised a good segue into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is very recently Jack Dorsey endorsed RFK Jr., who's running for president of the Democratic ticket. Even though they're not going to allow any debates or any sort of primaries to occur with RFK Jr., the Democratic National Committee has, I guess, decided on winners already, just like they did with Hillary, right? I mean, ironically, repeating the same mistakes of 2016 by basically deciding beforehand who the candidate should be. But he endorsed RFK Jr. As you know, RFK also participated in the Bitcoin conference and came out as a Bitcoiner. I think Vivek Ramaswamy is also pro-Bitcoin as well. He's running on the other side of the political divide in the Republican camp. And you had, of all people, Ron DeSantis, who, when he announced his candidacy a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, was asked specifically about Bitcoin, and he said, he's a big proponent. He feels like we should have the right to buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin and transact in Bitcoin, and it's Big Brother-like. I'm putting words in his mouth, but he's basically saying that it infringes on our freedom if the government tells us what we can and cannot buy with our own money. Um, unfortunately, it seems, and this is something we talked about over a year ago in our meetup groups, where it was becoming slowly apparent that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is turning into a right wing, left wing issue. And I know, like RFK Jr. is a left wing Democrat, party person, but he says a lot of things that are very right wing as well, right? I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
he's very suspicious of vaccines. He's very pro sort of personal freedom and choice, when it comes to say vaccine stuff.
He admitted the CIA killed his uncle.
Exactly. I mean, he says the kind of things that you would hear from some of the, pretty right wing part. So I would say that he's sort of center right, quite center right, whereas everyone on the left is firmly against cryptocurrency, and it's so confusing, right? Because it's the people on the right that are highly conservative, that you would think that it's the people on the right that would be against innovation like
Mm-hmm.
cryptocurrency. And they would like, no, no, we want our dollar system, we want to stick to what we know works, blah, 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 blah. But no, it's the people on the left who are supposed to be pro technology, pro innovation, pro new ideas, who are just adamantly against cryptocurrency. It is such a bizarre shift. It's analogous to the shift of the right wing people being pro freedom of speech. Like you should be able to say what you believe. As long as you're not, calling to violence, right? Whereas people on the left now say, well, you had better use these pronouns in the right way. You had better not, deny vaccines. You had better not say anything against, that, disease we won't mention, so we don't get, booted off the YouTube. And it's very bizarre to see this sort of shift in priorities and values between the left and the right, and crypto unfortunately is caught right in the middle. What are your thoughts about the hyper politicization of crypto that we are now? I would say the cake is firmly baked. Now it's a political issue. Now the question is, where is this going to go politically? I unfortunately it's now in the political arena, and I think it's going to have to be resolved there, which really distresses me a lot because I hate partisan politics. And unfortunately, as much as I try to avoid it, it has come for this technology that I'm so enthused by, right? Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about this a while ago. I think on one of our first episodes, it's not a if, it's when this becomes, a bipartisan issue. And unfortunately, like we said, we're getting closer and closer. We're probably 6 months away. I mean, the drums are already starting, but we keep joking. December, January, the drums are going to be on full rally. And like you said, the Republic. It seems evident to a lot of people. The Republican Democrat is going to front run Biden Trump round two. We'll see, because like I told you, depending on who I talk to, some people think DeSantis has a shot. Even I met some Pencer folks, but a lot of people think it's obvious going to be Trump. Biden round two, unfortunately. And like we've talked about this too. One thing, it was very apparent before COVID, but now it's just like clear as day. A lot of people just don't do their own homework anymore, like on anything. Like I mean, this probably was a very frustrating for you with all the time, money, education, like back breaking studying you've done after COVID. During COVID, everyone just pulled a PhD out of their ass real quick and was and even me, I joke as a gym bro, I would talk to some people and I'm like, dude, you don't know basic anatomy. I tell people, if I can like out anatomy you just need to shut up, because it's I'm not even like anywhere in the ballpark, let alone compared to you and some of the colleagues and people. But yeah, it just showed it. People, would rather be controlled than free. They'd rather just be spoon-fed some stuff. Have a nice walking note card. Part of that, comes from our education system too. It's like, leaving high school, kids don't know how to do taxes now, or actually make a proper resume or social skills, this, that, and a third. But thank God they know algebra, right? So, and it's the same thing too. It's like we're really good society making walking note cards, and that just shit flows downstream, and we see it in our politics. You can talk to someone and just hear a couple little buzzwords they say, and you're like, you're left, you're right, and that's not good. And the reason I bring that up is, like you said, and we've talked about this too, like crypto, Bitcoin, especially Bitcoin, it is like the most progressive talking point ever. Like you said, brand new, revolutionary technology. They're always talking about inequality. Basically, if you have a phone and a freaking internet connection, you can have it. Obviously with the old whales and miners, there's a little bit of the haves and haves not. But like hypothetically, if you're inclined enough, and you know the code, correct me, like a Raspberry Pi is like $300-400. I mean, you can spin one of those up, and you see every once in a while on Twitter, maybe once or twice a month, some kid in Utah in his college dorm has a Raspberry Pi that like actually wins a Bitcoin. But like we talked about, it is like one of the most progressive talking points where it's like, this is the money for the people, forget the 1%. And like we said, three of the biggest names against it right now: Biden, AOC, Elizabeth Warren. And I'm like you, I just find myself scratching my head. But I guess my long-winded point with this is yeah, it's unfortunate. Like we said, eventually, like you said, the cake is baked. This was gonna become a partisan issue. For me, it's not even the fact it's a bipartisan issue right now. It's just the fact, like we said. But both sides just stick so strongly to their thing that people that watch Fox and CNN, instead of talking to people that are in this space like you and me, they're gonna get their talking points from their side on their figureheads, and that's just gonna. I just don't see how that works well for anybody. That's the real thing that concerns me. It's not even that it's a bipartisan thing. It's that the left is going to get their spin on crypto and their views on it, and the right's going to get theirs. And that middle ground that crypto is supposed to be, I think, is going to slowly get whitewashed.
Yeah, I think something's got to give. I keep waiting for the likes of Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, the other big names in cryptocurrency like Charles Hoskinson, Dan Held, Michael Saylor, the lot of them, coalescing together and creating some sort of a super PAC, because you can do that, right? Create a super PAC to not only promote candidates that are Jack Dorsey is another name, of course, not only promote candidates that are pro cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, but actively campaign against or fund against candidates that are vehemently and irrationally against cryptocurrency for whatever reason, right? So I keep waiting for the day for all of these crypto billions that are apparently out there floating in the etherverse to come and actually have some sort of real world impact on our politics, but it sort of goes to my earlier point, which is the community itself is not unified, right? So Michael Saylor wants nothing to do with somebody like CZ. It wants nothing to do with somebody like Charles Hoskinson, say, or Vitalik Buterin, right? I mean, just another great example of a very accomplished and well-respected figure, but Bitcoin maximalists, regard him as some sort of like borderline fraud, right? Which is just ridiculous. So this is really one of those things that is against us. The only upside I can see to this situation is that if and when Bitcoin survives all of this, and I'm sure that it will, people can never say anymore that Bitcoin is ever going to die. If it has survived all of the things of the last 18 months, including, all this SEC crackdown, that is it. It's a cockroach. You cannot kill it. The last 18 months, if you compress them all, is basically the equivalent of like a meteor hitting Earth and killing the dinosaurs, and just the cockroaches are left, right? And that Bitcoin is that cockroach.
Not even just that. I know I was telling you and some other people this, but even like via people that work the gym, they're kind of asking me like, "Oh, it's down from 65K. Are you freaking out?" And, I've told them we've had our own small internal, bear bull markets in crypto, but we've never had a full-on recession. I brought up last night, we just ended a 12-year bull market. Literally, Bitcoin was created at I forget what it was. It was like 30 days after Lehman Brothers, but it's not a coincidence, when it was created, because whoever Satoshi was, they were like, okay, this is a problem. I'm going to roll the dice, see if this works. And luckily we have an alternative now because, imagine if '08 happened and we didn't, no one ever made Bitcoin. Like, where the fuck would we be right now after all the tomfoolery the last 36 months? But my point with that is I was telling you what you just said, the cockroach effect. I think if whatever this recession, depression, the next 24, 36 months looks like to your point, if we survive this political shit, any more further SEC bullshit, this recession stuff, and we come out of there, and whenever, if it's 24, 48 months, next time we finally break six figures, I'm like you. I'm like, the cake's baked. It's titanium cockroach. Like I impossible is almost, you don't want to be like, there's a 0.1% chance, but I'm like you. I'm like, if we can get through the next 12 more months, I think it's basically, off to the races at this point.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think I'm hoping it's less than 12 months, but I think just a couple of days ago, I mentally wrote off the rest of the year. I'm like, you know what? do not have any expectations for the rest of the year, because here's like some of the things that are coming in the next, what the rest of the year, right? So these lawsuits that we talked about, the XRP thing is going to like at some point resolve. This Binance thing at some point is going to get resolved. There's going to be more and more noise made because the political campaign is now starting for the elections over the next, few months and weeks. There's going to be a lot of, I think, talk about monetary policy in these debates, because Bitcoin has now ingratiated itself into the political spectrum as well. So I think there's going to be talk. I mean, it's really quite remarkable that Vivek Ramaswamy was there at the Bitcoin conference, and RFK Jr. was there at the Bitcoin conference. Ron DeSantis, and it happened in Miami, which is Ron DeSantis's state, right? So it's definitely come into the political conversation. But a few other things that we have to look forward to for the rest of the year is now that the stupid debt ceiling debate has been settled, the Treasury is going to be looking to refill its coffers, and of course it's going to do that by issuing new debt. And that means that it's going to be, seeking about $1 trillion over the next several months and weeks of debt issuance. Someone's going to have to buy this debt, of course. So that $1 trillion is going to have to come from somewhere. So some of that liquidity may come from the markets, right? So the markets may drop for that reason alone, because that $1 trillion is now yielding about 5% or so, depending on the duration that they issue at. So a lot of people are going to be like, you know what, in these uncertain times, I'll take 5%, for 6 months or 1 year, or whatever the duration is. They'll probably do short duration, assets. So that's one liquidity drain that may be arriving. The other thing that you mentioned earlier as well is the commercial real estate market is really showing a lot of signs of cracking. You're seeing all of these apartments in, not apartments, but commercial real estate in San Francisco that's bottoming, and LA that's bottoming, because a lot of people are leaving these places, and that really has a huge impact on the local economies if people are just leaving and they're leaving behind commercial real estate, because a lot of banks are tied to these, real estate loans.
Yep.
And they're already under stress. So more banking failures may be arriving in the next few weeks, especially if they raise interest rates again. So these are all things that are sort of unresolved for the next several months, and will likely have a bearish impact on all markets. And I don't think crypto is going to be safe from that. It'll be interesting to see that if more banks do fail, does crypto go up again like it did the last time they failed? But who knows? If we've learned anything about cryptocurrency markets, is that they're very unpredictable. And it seems also that the Fed is pretty adamant about, bringing the inflation numbers, below a certain percentage. So it looks like, the rates may stay where they are, or, even go up a little bit more over the next couple of months, getting us to August. And then we just have another 4 months to go. And the Fed may just say, we're just going to hold rates here for the next 4 months. Which basically just means there's not going to be much liquidity. There's going to be a lot of stress at the financial markets for the next 6 months. But, going into next year, markets abroad for crypto should be open. Hong Kong should be fully operational. There should be more cryptocurrency activity going on in Europe and in the Middle East, because they have actually opened those companies up with open arms. XRP thing will be done. Binance thing by the end of the year may be settled one way or the other. Coinbase lawsuit may also be heading towards some sort of resolution. So in my own head, I've just said, it's just going to suck for the rest of the year. Keep yourself busy. Keep stacking sats. And try not to let the news, get in the way of your fundamental analysis of, your belief in crypto. How are you thinking about the rest of the year?
Yeah, I was probably like that. I would say even in January. I mean, maybe I could be wrong. Going in January, we're at 30K, and I was like, okay, we've been going down for like a calendar year. Maybe we could trickle this year, and then same thing too. Like, we kind of started sideways. Some of the bank stuff started happening, and I was like, all right, this year's kind of written off, most likely just for macro everything, and maybe Bitcoin breaks out to couples. I wasn't really too optimistic on that. Like, to your point, it looks like it's not doing it. but we were kind of joking, man. Like if you survived the last like 18 months, you're kind of a warrior. And one thing, I didn't think it was really impressive. But I remember one time you were telling me that like, when basically most of 2022 started happening, everything from Terra, FTX, name your wild card house of or name your house of cards that basically blew up. Not like I called them, but I'm like, oh yeah, this kind of happened in 2017, 18 with all the ICO shit. And like one thing we joke about too is I tell people you kind of have to get, like, I call it like a crypto crazy escape velocity. Once you get through one full cycle and you get to your second cycle, you're probably at a point where even when it retraces, you're still in the green from where you bought. And like we've joked about it too, like if you want to really mentally harden yourself, like, there's some good self-help books, you can take some psychology courses, but a good 24, 36 months in crypto will mentally harden you like nothing else. So it's like going into the year, I wasn't expecting much. And like you said, I think probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was kind of just like maybe at the house chilling at the gym, and I was kind of just like seeing like, oh, we're still sideways again, just macro, how much crap's going on right now. I was like, yeah, we're probably going sideways for the rest of the year. And outside of everything you just said, going into 2024, on top of the political stuff to look forward to, also the halving is going to be happening next year, which people still debate how much that affects price, this, that, and a third. But the fact that people look forward to it, and also it's a mathematical change to the Bitcoin network, it's going to have a positive output effect whether you want it to or not. But yeah, everything you just said, I agree with too. And even going into this year, I was kind of mentally numbed out, and I'm just like you. I'm just kind of another day, another dollar, and just keep the DCA sat stacking going. So unfortunately, not looking forward to much until next year.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You just have to wait it out. That's the other thing is that if you're in crypto today and you're listening to this and you're anxious and you're still holding, and gains will come. I think I'm still very optimistic about this space in general. And when they do, don't let anyone tell you that you were lucky, right? Because it really takes a lot out of you to be holding through.
Holding is the hardest thing to do, man. It sounds so easy on paper.
Exactly right, man. Well, anyway, any other topics you want to cover before we call it? Or should we just end on that super optimistic note?
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of good stuff today. I think like a good theme just for this whole conversation is the sea is rocky right now, but a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. So shit's crazy right now, but like we said, whether it's 24 or 36 months from now, hopefully macroly everything's doing better. But if the crypto market's up, we'll look back and we'll just kind of be laughing because in the moment everything seems big. And we were talking about a year in crypto is a lifetime. It was ballpark this time last year as all the FTX and the Terra Luna stuff was happening, and that feels like an eternity when it was a year ago. So 24 months from now, hopefully, if we're in a bull market, all this stuff is going to seem like water under the bridge. So and just enjoy the storm. It's going to make a good sailor.
Absolutely, man. All right, man. It was a great conversation as always. See you again, hopefully within a week or so.
No, definitely, man. Always appreciate it.